Aiya, meldor, le saludamos la Sociedad Tolkiendili de México en esta entrevista especial titulada Scheduling Middle Earth, an interview with Paul Sarando. So, hi, Paul, how are you?
Oh, good. Thank you for inviting me for this interview. I gotta say, I'm really flattered and I feel honored that you asked me for this interview. Um, but I gotta say, I'm a little bit nervous because I've never been interviewed about my project before. But also, I don't really have a chance to, talk too much Tolkien with like my friends and family. So I want to ask for forgiveness ahead of time if I mispronounce any names or words.
Don't worry, we're very happy to have you here, and I think the audience will also be delighted to hear about your work. So right now I'm going to read your biography, a little bit of the things that you have completed. I will read it in English, and then maybe we can start with this questioning back and forth. You can explore your opinions as much as you want. You're welcome to explore as much as you want. Okay.
Great. All right. Thank you.
So Paul Sarando was born and raised in Tucson, Arizona, which is home to the Pascua Yaqui tribe, which he is a member of that tribe. He graduated from the University of Arizona with a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science. And even though he has lived in other cities at different times, he moved back to Tucson in 2011, where he has worked as a research software engineer for the University of Arizona ever since. In 2012, he decided to reread The Hobbit before the film trilogy came out in theaters, and a co-worker lent him his copy of the annotated Hobbit. And it wasn't long before he learned about the Shire calendar, and not long after that he decided to create his own graphical web-based simulation of the Shire calendar. And the Shire-Reckoning project, the project that we're going to explore today, has been his hobby and his passion ever since 2014. So welcome, Paul. We're very happy to have you. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about how did the work of Tolkien first came into your life?
Yeah, sure. So, as you mentioned in my introduction, I reread The Hobbit in 2012 before the movies came out. But I actually, the first time I read The Hobbit, it was when I was much younger. I was probably about maybe 10 or 11 years old, I think. And it was my older brother got me a copy of The Hobbit. And in fact, I think it was it might have been the 50th anniversary edition, the one with the nice green leather binding and slipcase and everything with the gold lettering. I remember that. My mom still has that copy to this day. Yeah, so I think that was the first time I read The Hobbit. And it was I was hooked like from the beginning. I loved it, and I think it was even probably the longest book I had read at that point, which I was pretty happy about. But yeah, so yeah, I think that would be my introduction to the Hobbit and Tolkien's work in general. And yeah, I took me a little while to get around to reading the Lord of the Rings. I think once the movies came out, around 2000, 2001, the Peter Jackson movies, I decided I would finally read the Lord of the Rings before those movies came out. Unfortunately, I didn't quite finish them. I think I got halfway through the second book, but I love the movies. I was a huge fan, but once the Hobbit movies came out, then I reread the annotated Hobbit, and I think I appreciated it a lot more rereading it when I was older, and then I finally dove in and finished the Lord of the Rings not too long after that.
Good. These annotated versions, they tend to, engage newer audiences, and then maybe provide, I don't know, this other aspect of the graphics maybe, or something additional to grab the interest of newer audiences.
Oh yeah, I love that about the annotated Hobbit. Like all the different illustrations from around the world. It was just great, and just all the also the extra information, like things that I would never looked up on my own or even known about before. For example, about the Shire calendar. That's where I first learned about it, was from the annotated Hobbit.
Great. So you mentioned before that you are, in your biography, you mentioned that you are a senior software engineer, and then right now you're working at the University of Arizona. Mm-hmm. So how did this interest in the intersection of technology and the humanities begin for you?
Yeah, so for me, I would say the intersection between humanity and the technologies, I would have to say, began for me with video games, actually. Yeah, I mean, I pretty much grew up with video games. You know, I got a Nintendo for Christmas back in the 80s. And before that, I was playing my older brother's like Odyssey and Atari. So, but it wasn't until this game came out for the Super Nintendo called Final Fantasy VI. In that game, well, I just loved it. Like the first thing that really impressed me about that game was the music, really, because I had studied music in high school and a little bit in college, and I was just really impressed with what they can do with that technology and the music. And there's even like a little part in the game where you get to play along with an opera, and you have to like control the outcome of the opera. But even like the graphics, you know, at the time were really impressive. I remember thinking how some of the backgrounds in that game, I thought looked like oil paintings to me. But it wasn't. It was the story that really like touched me. It was about halfway through the game. I don't want to give any spoilers in case anybody is interested in playing this game, but I'll just say, you know, right, like the end of Act 1, beginning of Act 2 of this game, it's probably about halfway through. Things like the story kind of took a little, it got more serious as far as I could tell at the time. And there was this scene that happened with one of the characters that like really like touched me deeply. And I remember thinking at that time that, you know, wow, this game, it's not just like some throwaway entertainment for children. I got the impression that the creators of this game were actually like trying to create art, you know, between the beautiful images and the music, and now like this really like touching story. And so at that point, I think is when I felt like, you know, you can really like use technology to really like tell a good story and express art. And so I think that's where it started for me.
I still remember Final Fantasies in the back of my head. I was a teenager, and it was the very first time that I saw something like that. And it has that effect, like this lingering effect in the person. So it's interesting, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then, you know, now of course these days you have big blockbuster games and things like, you know, there's things like what's that one on HBO with Pedro Pascal?
Last of Us.
Last of Us, yeah.
Last of Us.
I haven't played that game myself, but I've always heard about how good it is, and I've watched the show, and you know, that's really good story. But yeah. So even to this day, I think they're using technology to like express art and tell good stories.
True. So have you noticed like maybe any, I don't know, any lessons or any teachings from your career as a software engineer that has proven useful in the development of your project, the Shire-Reckoning?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, yeah, definitely. I would say that my training as a software engineer definitely helped me with this project, especially things like, you know, gathering requirements and you know, working to specifications. You know, that's basically what I did, you know, especially as the project got more and more mature and I was trying to do more and more advanced things with it, is I would, you know, at first it was just, you know, kind of basic, and I was just kind of following along with, you know, sites like Shire-Reckoning.com and doing their suggestions. But once I decided to take it like, you know, and especially create the Middle Earth simulations, then it was time. I decided I would, just use Tolkien's writings in Appendix D of the Lord of the Rings, where he described all these calendars and the rules of these calendars, and I was going to take that as like basically like my software specification, like, and I would gather my requirements use that as my requirements gathering document, basically. So that way I wouldn't be influenced by like other people's ideas and interpretations of the calendars in Appendix D. I would just use like, just what is Tolkien telling me? And other software engineer skills, like maybe like taking maybe not tackling the whole thing at once, like just breaking it down into small problems and tackling a few at a time. Like first I started with the Shire calendar. Once I got that working, I was satisfied. Then I moved on to the Rivendell Reckoning calendar next. And then I thought, well, I can do that. Maybe I can do the Gondor and Númenor calendars. And then eventually it was like, well, I've got all these like, pretty basically synced up with the modern day calendar. But Tolkien's writing all about these different leap day rules and all these other things with the calendars. Maybe that can take the next step and see if I can accomplish that and do an actual Middle Earth simulation and implement everything that Tolkien's talking about. And I didn't even know if it was possible at first. But happily it did become possible. Yeah. So definitely I think my skills as a software engineer helped out, but also I would have to say that I think it also went the other way as well. Not only did I learn about all these real world calendar rules I had never learned before, and I even learned a little bit about astronomies that I never learned about before starting on this project. But this has been my hobby and passion project for a long time, as you said in my introduction. So eventually I would use this project whenever I would want to, for a few times when I wanted to learn something new, like a new programming framework or something, or a new tool. I would try out in the Shire-Reckoning first and see if I can improve my project first with those skills. So in that way, it's kind of like the Shire-Reckoning project has also contributed back in enhancing my skills and helped contribute to then I can use those skills in my everyday work. So my software engineering skills helped me with the project, and I would say the project also helped me with my work skills as well.
I think that was probably Tolkien's project for everything that he wrote, that he was going to influence the life of the readers up to the extent that they could improve in their works, but also enjoy the works that he was developing. So it's a really interesting cycle. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think I've heard online about, other professors wishing that maybe he didn't spend so much time on the Lord of the Rings and Silmarillion, because he could have contributed so much more to his, his studies and philology, I guess. But, on the other hand, when you have a passion project like that, sometimes it goes both ways. And sometimes you need a passion project to inspire your other work.
Yes.
So maybe that was Lord of the Rings and Silmarillion for Tolkien. I don't know.
I know, like we still have some decades to figure that out, maybe.
Right.
So you mentioned that this process in designing your site, the Shire-Reckoning, and this site is highly interactive. Did you have any technical challenges in the process, or did you have any complications in the calculations of the dates and cycles?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think I briefly touched on this just a minute ago. I mean, when the project first started out, I kept it real simple, and I was, just following the recommendations of ShireReckoning.com, and just, keeping the Shire calendar in sync with the modern day Gregorian calendar, the most commonly used calendar in modern day, and keeping the same leap day rules. And that was pretty straightforward. To me, it was pretty simple to figure out and get it displaying. Always have Mid-Year's Day on June 21st. And then I did the same thing with the Rivendell Reckoning. Slightly different rules, they have slightly different leap year rules. But by keeping it in sync with the modern calendar, again, to me, that was a little bit straightforward. So, but once I decided that I wanted to not just synchronize the calendar like Shire Mid-Year's Day with June 21st, like maybe I want to let the users choose to start the calendar from any other day, So for example, as of today, there's a setting where you can synchronize Mid-Year's Day with the December solstice, because that's the summer solstice in the southern hemisphere. So for all of our Tolkien fans down in the southern hemisphere, New Zealand or South America, maybe they want to look at the seasons of Rivendell and the Shire calendar matching up with their seasons down there.
Yeah.
And also, and then of course, so that's a complication. And then of course, once I decided not to only follow the leap day rules of the modern calendar and follow all of the different leap day rules that Tolkien specified in Appendix D, it's similar, but it's just different enough that then I had to figure out, okay, I have to do like more advanced calculations basically. And so, yeah, that was a little, maybe a little bit of a challenge for me. I mean, not too much. I studied math and science for my degree in college, so I'm definitely comfortable with math. Obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be tackling a project like this. But but it definitely had me thinking everything through that Tolkien had written in Appendix D, and also trying to make sure that I got everything right. And even going back to the last question about my software engineering skills, and then then I would like have to write a bunch of tests. That's another skill I applied is like, I think I got it right, but I better write a bunch of tests and make sure things are working the way I expected. And in fact, once I was like fairly confident I had gotten it right, I was still in the back of my mind thinking, well, is this exactly right? Like maybe I'm doing it in like a simplistic kind of way, or maybe there's a better way to do this. And so I actually decided that I would go and look at the source code for the Google Chrome browser, because their source code is open source and anybody can go look. And your modern browser has to calculate the dates for the modern Gregorian calendar date. And in fact, it's that date object that the browser calculates that I am using to display all the dates. That was what I was depending on originally. And I mean, I still depend on it. So I depend on those calculations of the modern date in browsers to display the Shire calendar. But I went and I double checked to see exactly how they were doing those calculations in Google Chrome. And I was pretty happy to see that the way I was calculating days and Middle Earth simulated leap years, it was really similar to the way Google Chrome browser was doing it for the modern calendar. I mean, they're doing like crazy, like they're doing like kind of an advanced like computer math tricks to make sure that they have high performance. And but I decided I didn't do that because I didn't want to do any fancy tricks in my project, because my project is open source. I wanted to place more importance on understandability and readability, not only for myself in case I have to come along later and make changes or fix something, then I want to make sure it's easy for me to understand. But I made this project open source because I was hoping to share it with anyone who's interested. And if anyone is interested in how these calculations are done, or if there's some other Middle Earth calendar expert out there that wants to review my project to see if I'm actually doing it right, or has some kind of critique for me, maybe if I have made any mistakes, I would love an expert to come along and point it out to me. So I keep my project open source, and I want to make it readable for everyone to be able to understand, from beginners who are trying to learn programming, perhaps, maybe they're, or all the way up to experts who want to double check my work.
I think that's great, because you make this knowledge available to everybody, and the way that you work with different layers, like the the first type of calendar, Shire-Reckoning, but then you include other calendars, and the calculations for each of the calendars is also specific. So who knows, maybe someone can take or participate from your code and develop another calendar that they're thinking about.
Oh, sure, absolutely, yeah. In fact, one user from Reddit asked me at one point. He had an idea for his own version of an Elvish calendar, and he asked, like, well, would you be able to work on, like, make it happen? And I was like, well, I don't really have the free time for that, but my code is open source. So if you know anybody that knows JavaScript, they can help you create your own custom Elvish calendar based on my code.
Imagine that type of project as well, like
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another user that reached out to me on GitHub. I've had two people reach out to me on GitHub by creating GitHub issues, which is a fine way to reach out. Alex Munoz actually reached out to me and first contacted me, and that's how I got contacted for this interview. But another user that reached out to me on GitHub, he asked about, like, well, what about updating the Shire calendar to include, like, the moon phases and on the different dates, like, it will help out people that are, like, doing role-playing games or something like that. And I think that's a great idea, but once again, this is my hobby, my side project. I don't really have the time to do that right now, but it's open source and somebody can take a lot. There are libraries out there, JavaScript libraries, that will do moon phase calculations and sunrise and sunset calculations, and maybe somebody will put that together with my code, and they can have a calendar that does that.
Excellent. Projects like these, projects like yours, they're seed for many other projects to come in. And
I hope so.
That's the Tolkien spirit. That's the sub-creative kind of spirit, right?
Oh, yeah. Other hands and minds, right? Yeah. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Paul, it's really interesting that you combine your background as a software engineer, but how did the idea of creating an automated calendar based on the works of Tolkien come about? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So, as I mentioned earlier, it kind of started with back Hobbit Day 2012, and with the annotated Hobbit and learning about the Shire calendar. And at that time, I had discovered websites like Shire-Reckoning.com, where they had the great graphical layout of the Shire calendar. And there was other, like, even interactive website like the Encyclopedia of Arda, where you can it'll show you today's date, and it'll try and tell you what the date is in the Shire Reckoning, but also in other calendars of Middle Earth and Appendix D. But it was kind of like a basic layout where there was kind of, I would say, kind of basic, where it was just text, a list of text items and text inputs, where you can even choose a date, and it was interactive. It'll change it to show you, like, well, what's that correspond to in these calendars and even today's calendar. But it didn't have the nice, like, graphical layout that I thought that Shire-Reckoning.com had, where all the nice colors and the showing the different month names and everything. But yeah, so that was kind of early on, and then I would have to say, so that was like around 2012 when I was first researching the Shire calendar and learning about it. But then this was also early on in my job at the University of Arizona, where I was hired on by Andrew Leonards, who was my supervisor at the time. He's the one that hired me onto the project originally. And he's also what happens to be one of my favorite supervisors I've worked for, and also, like, a great software engineer, one of the best software engineers I've worked with. But he, at that time, right around that time, maybe around 2013 or so, he had told us about something called Y Day. And so this is based on someone who was kind of like an internet celebrity at the time. He went by the name Y the Lucky Stiff. And if you want to look him up, that's kind of spelled with underscore WHY, Y the Lucky Stiff. But anyway, he was kind of like passionate about programming and teaching people how to program in the Ruby programming language. And he kind of became a little bit famous from that. And but for some reason, right around that time, he just kind of disappeared from the internet. And so one of his fans decided, like, well, you know what? Y isn't around to share the passion for programming with us anymore. But why don't we like kind of honor what he was doing by having something called Y Day? And that's supposed to be a day in August where you pick up a programming project to work on that's just for fun. You know, it's not like a chore. It's not something related to work or anything. It's just something you want to do for fun. And the people on my team thought that was a cool idea. And I think we all picked a Y Day project to work on that first year. And I did it again the second year. And I think it was in my second Y Day project where I decided to do a Shire calendar. And my job at the time, I do all kinds of programming now, and I did back then too, but I was mainly hired on to do the web-based, the front-end UI web-based graphical programming. So that was what I was working on at the time. And as I said before, there was like Shire-Reckoning.com had a great graphical representation of the Shire calendar. There was a simple interactive one that like Encyclopedia of Arda had, but I didn't find one that had both things, which is what my job basically was. And so I thought, well, if I can't find one online, and this is what I do as part of my job, maybe that could be my fun Y Day project, is to create, something a little bit more interactive. In the very first time I created it, I don't think it was very interactive. I think it just, it knew what today's date was, and it laid out the calendar graphically the way Shire-Reckoning.com does. But it was kind of interactive in the sense that it would like highlight today's date on the Shire calendar. And it would also list every single day on the calendar with the corresponding Gregorian date, our modern day date. And it still does that now. But but it took me a long time. And, like I said, this has been my hobby ever since then. And it took me a while to actually, I think, add the interactive part where you get to change the date and choose different dates. Yeah. But yeah, I would say that like how the my Shire-Reckoning project started, started with the annotated Hobbit and learning about Shire calendar and Shire-Reckoning through the great online resources about the Shire calendar, like shirecalendar.com. Or no, sorry, Shire-Reckoning.com.
Shire-Reckoning.
Yeah, Shire-Reckoning.com. And Encyclopedia of Arda up through Y Day project, and just trying to make one for myself for fun. And it's honestly, it's been a fun hobby ever since then. That's why I still work on it. It's because I still enjoy working on it. And when I have time to work on it, it's still a fun project for me.
Nice. So you mentioned that the Encyclopedia of Arda and the Shire-Reckoning, and I think you mentioned the Tolkien's Gateway. Maybe they list these references, these additional references. Did you use any other textual sources for the development of your project, like besides the annotated Hobbit, or maybe something additional?
Sure. So like I said, when it started out, it was mainly, when I was learning about it, it was annotated Hobbit and Shire-Reckoning.com and online sources like that. But when it came time to actually create the project, I just wanted to rely mainly on Tolkien's Appendix D, and especially later on in the project when I moved beyond just showing it aligned with today's date the way Shire-Reckoning.com does. When I decided to incorporate all of the different leap year rules that are described, like the different Gondor leap year rules, and I try to simulate all those, and the Rivendell reckoning and leap year rules, that I just relied almost 100% on Tolkien Appendix D from the Lord of the Rings, and just Tolkien's writing, because again, Tolkien Gateway, a great resource if you're just curious about something, you want to learn something, and they take extra care to try and be as accurate as possible. But people make mistakes, and there are mistakes on Tolkien Gateway. But the great thing about Tolkien Gateway is, they provide the book references, and you can always go back to the original source to check on it. And so when I was doing my project, I wanted to make sure, did I get all the names right, the names of the months and the weekdays, and later on the leap year rules. And so I just relied just on Appendix D for things like that, for the simulation and the calendar itself. Every so often I venture outside Appendix D for like when I have some kind of insight I wanted to share in my, I say on my project notes, I'll bring in like, the timeline from Appendix D. I'll mention things from other sources as well, maybe even first editions of, Appendix D or something like that. But yeah, as far as like the actual calendar itself and the simulation and the project, it's just about 100% Appendix D.
Appendix D. Mm-hmm. Nice. So we know that there might be some, we might call them inconsistencies, right? And there's this great focus on correctness and the accuracy of some of the dates. And your project, the Shire-Reckoning, is a combination of several calendars. But since Tolkien didn't really leave a systematized calendar, it's kind of tricky to establish the correctness overall, right? But what criteria would you say you use to resolve these ambiguities or these inconsistencies in the texts?
Sure. Yeah. So, right. When I was working on these projects, especially when I decided to accurately simulate all the rules and leap day rules and all those things in my project, I wasn't a calendar expert or anything like that. I actually learned a lot about calendars, real world calendars, as well as the Middle Earth calendars in the process of creating this project. So yeah, I wasn't even sure if it was possible at first. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to follow everything Tolkien was saying in Appendix D. But the more I tried and the more I tried to incorporate in my project, the more I actually appreciated what Tolkien was writing. And as a side note, that's one of the things that I hope people get out of my project too, is that, more of an appreciation. If it's easier to understand it through my simulations, then hopefully to get more out of what he wrote in Appendix D. But yeah, as I was working on it and trying to make my simulations as accurate as possible, I was actually surprised at just how complete and how many details he actually was able to include in Appendix D. And I'm not even sure if everyone realizes this, but as far as I can tell, the calendars of Númenor and Gondor are actually, I think, are 100% complete, starting from Second Age Year 1 all the way through the end of the Third Age, and even some of the new reckoning into the Fourth Age. But yeah, all of that is like I as far as I can tell, all the rules are accounted for and everything is 100% complete. And I even say that in my project's notes, that I was able to accurately simulate that calendar the most.
Okay.
But you are right. There are some ambiguities and some inconsistencies still that I had to deal with. And I also try to make that clear in my project. I try as much as possible to make it clear in my project what I'm taking directly from what Tolkien wrote in Appendix D versus let's say the blanks that I had to fill in and what I had to either compromise or even make up in order to make the simulations work. And I'd say one example of that is, I mentioned before that the leap year rules for the Gondor calendars, I think, are all in place. They're all there in Appendix D and 100% complete. And he even goes into describing the leap year rules and everything about the Shire calendar. But one thing that I find kind of ambiguous is there's a part where he's giving a hypothetical alignment of, what if New Year's Day in our calendar was the same day as New Year's Day in the Shire calendar, So if that were the case, I think he's just saying hypothetically, if that were the case, then when the one ring was destroyed, that was March 25th in the Third Age 3019. March 25th, the Shire calendar, if our calendars are aligned that way with the same New Year's Day, then that would actually end up being March 27th in our calendar. So yeah, it was just kind of like a hypothetical statement. But the thing, the statement that follows that is then he goes on to say, However, in the King's Reckoning and Steward's Reckoning calendar, it was March 25th. That, in the way I read that, and it took me a few times of reading that, but what I got out of that and the way I read that was that he was saying that the actual date of the destruction of the One Ring was March 25th in the Steward's Reckoning Gondor, the same as it was March 25th in the Shire. And if anyone was still observing the King's Reckoning calendar at that time, it was March 25th in that calendar as well. I speculate in my Project Reckoning's notes, like, who knows, maybe the Dunedain of the North are still following the King's Reckoning. Maybe they didn't care about the Steward's Reckoning. But the thing that struck me about that comparison is that it's because the Shire calendar is comes from the King's Reckoning calendar. The Shire was founded in Third Age 1601, but Bree was founded in Third Age 1300 before that. And Bree also uses a variation of the Shire calendar, almost exactly the same, just slightly different names for some months. But those come from the King's Reckoning calendar. So what makes sense to me is that if they if their calendar was adopted from the King's Reckoning, then obviously it must have followed the same leap year rules that the King's Reckoning had. And for the most part it does. It's almost like our calendar where they have a leap day every 4 years, and but they omit the leap day at every 100 years at the end of a century, they'd say. So like in our calendar, that would be like the year 1700, 1800, 1900. The difference being in our modern day calendar, every 400 years, we don't drop the leap day, we keep it. So like in the year 2000, we still had a leap day, just as we did every 4 years before and after that. King's Reckoning and Steward's Reckoning after that, a little bit different. They just drop the leap day every 100 years, and they keep doing that until 1,000 years. And then at the end of a millennium, then they do what Tolkien says is they have millennial editions. And it takes a little bit of sleuthing to figure out that that's 2 days. I think in the first edition of Appendix D, I think he actually explicitly says it was 2 days that they added at the end. Yeah. Okay. So that's pretty close. That's really similar. Like if, within 1,000 years, if we're adding the leap day back, in the year 400, 800, that's 2 days, but it's taking 1,000 years for Númenor and Gondor to add 2 days at the end of 1,000. Yeah. And actually in one of Tolkien's letters, he says that actually the Númenor system is actually slightly more accurate, when it comes to like following the solar year and the length of the year in our times. But yeah, it's slightly different, but very similar. Okay, so back to the question about ambiguities is he makes no mention whatsoever if the Shire calendar adopted those millennial editions, and if they had at the end of every 1,000 years added two leap days back in. And even if they did, when did they do it? Did they just do it when the King's Reckoning did it? I mean, that would make sense to me. Like their calendar came from the King's Reckoning, and the Kingdom of Arnor was around still at the beginning of the Shire Reckoning. So, if they were following the King's rules, as they say in the prologue, maybe that's one of the rules they followed was adding the 2 millennial leap days when the King's Reckoning would have added it, right? But Tolkien doesn't say whether or not they did. And then to convolute things even a little bit further is once the Steward's Reckoning came in, and the Stewards took over in Gondor at the end of the King's, they added a couple of special extra millennial, I just say special leap days of their own. 2 right before Steward's Reckoning was enacted, and one more a couple hundred years later or something like that. So that takes things out of whack even a little bit more. So the thing is that what makes that ambiguous is if the Shire calendar came from the King's Reckoning and it was following the same leap year rules, but if it didn't do these millennial editions and it didn't do these like Steward extra leap days, well then their New Year's days wouldn't be on the same day anymore. They would shift a little bit. They would be off. Yeah. And that goes for the same thing as March 25th. But that statement that Tolkien said in Appendix D the day of the destruction of the One Ring, March 25th in the Shire calendar, was March 25th in King's Reckoning and Steward's Reckoning. I take that to imply that means that somehow, some way, that the only thing that makes sense to me is that the Shire calendar did incorporate those extra millennial leap days somehow.
Yeah.
But he doesn't say if they did. And if they did, he doesn't say when or how they did it. So that's like one of the things I had to deal with in my simulation. And I say in my notes, like, I just kind of assume that, you know, for my purposes in my simulation, I just have to say the Shire calendar has adopted all those in order for it to end up in sync at the end of the third age, like he said they were. So I just put them at the exact same year, same time that the King's Reckoning and Steward's Reckoning did it. But who knows if the hobbits did that or not? I mean, maybe they were out of sync for a long time until Isengrim introduced Shire reform, and they decided to, like, well, we're gonna do Shire reform, which is, if you don't know, familiar with Shire reform, that's when they you know, in our calendar, like New Year's Day will be at a different weekday every year because of the leap year rules. But the hobbits, they didn't like their calendar shifting like that, so Shire reform, they decided to fix that, and they would have New Year's Day always at the beginning of the week, New Year's Eve always at the end of the week, and everything in between except for mid-Year's Day and then the leap day. Like, if those days don't have a day of the week, then every other day can fall on the same day of the week. And so, for example, Bilbo's birthday is always on a Thursday because of Shire reform.
Okay.
So yeah.
a tricky thing, right? To have your birthday on the same day. That would be weird.
I know. Yeah. It'd be kind of sad if your birthday is always on a Monday or something like that. Yeah. But otherwise, it is kind of tidy. And I've heard even in the real world that some people at some point in the past have pushed to have something like the Shire calendar and something like that to adopt it in real life, you know. Yeah, it is kind of convenient having a what do you call it? I think they call it maybe a perpetual calendar.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned that only by this statement from Appendix D, there's this possibility of making hypotheses and developing these projects and, you know, trying to correlate maybe like these different aspects that are found in the work of Tolkien. But do you think there might be other traditions that Tolkien also explores in his work that could be or that might be you know, enriched or emphasized in the presentation of the Shire calendar, or like having this digital form? Do you think that there might be a way to emphasize some dates or some celebrations maybe?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, I mean, another thing that like attracted me about the Shire Reckoning was and all the different holidays that described in Appendix D, you know. And so on a personal level, you know, I've always been curious, and I've always loved like astronomy, for example. You know, I'm not an astronomer. I never, you know, other than some like introductory courses in college, I never really studied it that much. But I still, you know, I love a good like, you know, space documentary on PBS or something, and I like to read the occasional like article or blog post related to the science and astronomy. And so I kind of like, one of the things that attracted me about the Shire calendar was how Mid-Year's Day was supposed to align with the summer solstice. And, you know, that summer solstice is an astronomical event, and I thought that was just a great thing, is that, and it was a big holiday. You know, that was like one of the most important holidays in the Shire calendar. So much so that their leap day comes right after Mid-Year's Day, and it's called Overlight. And Tolkien says something like that's a day of special holiday in their calendar. And that's like, you know, right around the summer solstice. And I just thought that was great to have holidays around summer solstice. And once again, you align the modern, the Shire calendar with the modern calendar, with the modern summer solstice. New Year's Eve and New Year's Day in the Shire calendar are in line with the winter solstice. So there it is again. You have another holiday around another astronomical celestial event. And I just, that was something that was like really attractive to me. And then even going on into other calendars of Appendix D, their holidays are also right around other astronomical events. For example, even though Tolkien doesn't explicitly say this about the Rivendell Reckoning, the calendar of Imladris, because he doesn't compare that calendar. He'll give you all the rules. They're pretty. I think that he gives you the complete leap day rules and the format and the layout and everything of how it works. But he doesn't really give you the alignment of it, except in only one instance. There's only one place he compares the reckoning of Rivendell to any other calendar, and that's that, you know, he says more or less the New Year of the Elves was on Shire April 6th. Okay, so if you align Shire Mid-Year's Day with the summer solstice, and then you align the New Year of the Elves with Shire April 6th, that gets their middle days, their three main holidays in the middle of the calendar of Imladris. That's pretty close to the autumnal equinox. And it's also, you know, Shire April 6th and their New Year's Day, that's also pretty close to the vernal equinox, the spring equinox. So again, holidays kind of close to celestial events. And then, of course, King's Reckoning, Shire Reckoning came from King's Reckoning. So King's Reckoning has their own mid-year's day. I believe it's pronounced Loen Day. And that's also summer solstice. And their New Year's Eve, New Year's Day would be by the winter solstice. But then when the Steward's Reckoning came along, the Steward other than their special leap days they added, it was only a minor modification they made to the King's Reckoning. And what they did was that the King's Reckoning has, just like the Shire calendar, all the months have 30 days, except in the King's Reckoning, the 2 months in summer, right around Mid-Year's Day or Loen Day, those months had 31 days.
Okay.
Steward's Reckoning did a little modification. They changed that so that those 2 months also only had 30 days. But then, so with the two, they needed 2 more days, obviously, to fill out the calendar. So instead, they had holidays. It would be right in between the equivalent of March and April. So that holiday was basically translates to Spring Day. I'm sorry, I forget the Quenya name for that. But yeah, so that's a holiday right by the spring equinox, and then they put another holiday right by the autumn equinox, right in between, I believe would be the equivalent of September and October. So yeah, this is kind of attractive to me that you have holidays celebrating like celestial events in you know, astronomical events. And
that's super interesting because the combination of the two makes the whole celebration very elusive and mysterious, maybe, and connected to specific knowledge of the movement of the stars and the movement of the celestial bodies, and it just makes the whole thing, you know, very like part of a myth, right? Which is part of Tolkien's process.
Sure. Yeah. And it's that combination of like myth and science that like keeps me coming back to Tolkien, because, you know, Tolkien may not have been a scientist, but he was a lover of and interested in science. Obviously, he was a lover of nature, but of course, he was also interested in like geography and astronomy. Maybe he's not an expert, but you know, he studied what he could and tried to make the moon phases as accurate as possible in Lord of the Rings. And I even speculate about that, you know, that, you know, so the leap day rules are intended to keep our calendars in sync with the seasons, right? So the King's Reckoning and Shire Reckoning, Tolkien even says that like their Mid-Year's Day was intended to be as much as possible in line with the summer solstice, and that's accomplished through their leap day rules. And it's the same thing in the real world. Our modern day Gregorian calendar, we have the leap day rules that we have because hundreds of years ago they noticed that, you know, the seasons were shifting, and I believe they were coming later in the calendar. So but the church at the time didn't like that. They wanted Easter to stay around the spring equinox, and that's how we got the, you know, we only had like, you know, a leap day every 4 years before that. And then that's how it was when Julius Caesar enacted it in 45 BC. But if you only do that, the seasons are going to start shifting away. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know, it was around 1500 something. I'm sorry if I can't remember the date, but the new Gregorian leap day rules were enacted, where we drop the leap day every end of century, but keep it every 400 years instead. And that was intended to keep the calendar in sync with the seasons. And I even speculate in my notes that, you know, the Númenóreans' millennial editions, maybe it could have been the responsibility of Tar Meneldur in Númenor. He reigned just before Tar Aldarion, who is, you know, he had the famous, from the famous story in Unfinished Tales, Aldarion and Arendis. But his father, Tar Meneldur, he was known as, I think, a star lover or sky lover, perhaps. You know, even in his name is the Quenya word for the heavens. You know, Menel, the starry heavens, because he built a tower in the north so he could go up and observe the stars and the heavens and the celestial bodies. So who knows? Maybe he was the one that became concerned that their calendar was falling out of shift with the celestial, like, solstices and equinoxes, or maybe the stars of the motions of the stars or something like that. And so maybe he was the one that invented the millennial editions in order to keep things, you know, in more in pace with those events.
Yeah,
that's my speculation.
Well, excellent speculations. It gives room for more investigation, more research, and more projects like that.
Yeah.
So we here in my group, my Smial Aglaron, we're very fond of these traditions, and one that is particularly interesting for us is Durin's Day. And so we also noticed that you make these calculations for Durin's Day. So would you like to tell us about, like, maybe if you encounter some difficulties, or what were some of the challenges that you faced?
Well, sure. I mean, well, just to clarify, you know, as I mentioned earlier, that my Shire-Reckoning project is really just focused on the calendars that are talked about in Appendix D. And unfortunately, Tolkien doesn't go into the specifications on calendars for the dwarves, and the Durin's Day isn't even mentioned in Appendix D. So I don't really go into that in my project, and I haven't really had to calculate that for my project myself. But I mean, of course, it's a Middle Earth holiday, and it has to do with the moon and the seasons, because, you know, what does Thorin say, that the New Year of the Dwarves is the first the last. Wait, let me look up the quote, because I want to get this right. He says it's the first day of the dwarves is, you know, when the first day of the last moon of autumn on the threshold of winter, and they call it Durin's Day when the last moon of autumn and the sun are in the sky together. So once again you have oops, let me bring back the. So once again you have you know, you've got the moon, you've got the seasons, and you've got a Middle Earth holiday. So of course I'm interested in, and I read about it and researched it myself. But unfortunately, there's nothing I can do to simulate it, because, I mean, that's basically all you get from Tolkien about Durin's Day, except for maybe later on in the story. I believe it's the day before Durin's Day, when they're searching for the door, and Durin happens to say, like, well, tomorrow's the last week of autumn. And that's kind of like, that's basically the only clues you get about Durin's Day. And then you do get, like, but then people online have tried to piece together when that might be. And one of the ways to do that is, like, knowing that there's supposed to be a crescent moon on Mid-Year's Day when they read the moon runes. And, like, I think I mentioned Douglas W. Harder's Hobbit timeline earlier, and, like, you know, that's one way that he used these clues to piece together a timeline for the Hobbit. And Andreas Muin, who also goes by Codex Regius, he's pieced together a Hobbit timeline using moon phases. And in fact, on his blog, Lilith's Middle Earth Science Pages, he talks a little bit about his book, The Moon and the Hobbit. But he went and laid out even, like, all the moon phases throughout the year of Bilbo's adventure, showing the crescent moon on Mid-Year's Day all the way up to what's supposed to be the crescent moon of Durin's Day. Although I think for his blog post, he made one slight error where he left out Mid-Year's Day on accident. So it's everything after Mid-Year's Day is slightly off, but I think in his book he's got the same thing, and he's got it correct. But either way, it's impressive to me what these people can do and can figure out. this is not my area of expertise. Once again, you know, I'm not an astronomer, even though because of Appendix D and also because of what I've learned through, you know, the Lord of the Rings Reader's Companion and learning about how Tolkien used the moon phases of 1940 to 1941 to align the moon phases in the story correctly. This has all become fascinating to me. I've actually learned quite a lot about, you know, the moon phases. Like, you know, I didn't really know much about the moon before this. You know, I knew about moon phases, you know, I knew about half moons, full moons, but I didn't really know that the moon rose and set an hour later each day. And that's kind of essentially how you get the moon phases. It was up to Shire-Reckoning.com to kind of show me the graphics. And then later on, when I was learning about the moon phases in the Lord of the Rings and playing with the Stellarium app, that I really like learned about like, oh, how all these things actually work.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's definitely an interesting topic to me, but you know, I wouldn't say that I know any more about Durin's Day than anybody else. And in fact, there's other people that have written more about it. Of course, on my Shire-Reckoning project site, you know, I do go out and I list all the holidays that I know about, especially they mostly come from Appendix D. One comes from the Silmarillion in the first stage, you know, the Gates of Summer. And of course, I do mention Durin's Day because, you know, these are the holidays I know about and they deserve, like, I just want to give a special mention to it. Okay. But yeah, so I do link to a couple of places, like I link to Andreas Moen or Codice Rexius blog, relates Miller Science pages about Durin's Day. And also I found a great blog post by Aaron Chong, who he did a bunch of research, finding a whole bunch of sources online and compiling a lot of other people's ideas, but also critiquing them. He'll critique Andreas Mons and he'll you know, show you like what doesn't exactly work and then he comes up with his own idea of where Durin's Day is. And so I kind of have to rely on their expertise. And then even more recently than that, an actual astronomer, Dr. Christine Larson, she wrote a paper, I think it was 2019, called Deconstructing Durin's Day. Okay. And yeah, she even discussed the different people that would try and figure out when Durin's Day is and trying to do the calculations. And she gave her own critique of you know how they went about it and you know, basically her paper is mainly, I think, more exploring like why people enjoyed this process of exploring, like trying to find the scientific, as much scientific, you know, reality as you can in these fictional stories. And, you know, we all do it because it's fun. It's fun to see if you can do it and how far you can do it. Yeah. But yeah, so, you know, for me, I rely on other people. I think it was Douglas Harder that first introduced me to the idea that, you know, in modern times, a lot of people would consider, you know, the autumn equinox to be the start of autumn and the winter solstice to be the start of winter. That's how like our modern societies view the seasons. Yeah. But there was ancient cultures. I think he says like in ancient Celtic cultures didn't do it that way. And I'm not sure if the Anglo-Saxon cultures, but I think even some other modern cultures actually take the equinox to be like the autumn equinox to be the middle of autumn and take the winter solstice to be the middle of winter. And so if you view it that way, it kind of seems that I think it seems like from what I gather from all these, what I've read from all these online sources, I think the dwarves probably do it that way too. Because a lot of people figure out that, you know, Durin's Day has got to be in October, the Shire month of October. Yeah. And, you know, when you align Shire Mid-Year's Day with the summer solstice, then the autumn equinox is really close to the very beginning of Shire October. It's like maybe like October 2nd or something, maybe October 3rd, something like that. It's really close to the beginning of that month. But then a lot of people have calculated Durin's Day happened in the story, like right at the end of the month. Aaron Chong has a little different idea. He's trying to use like real life moon phases
Okay.
Because Tolkien used real life moon phases of 1940 to 41 for Lord of the Rings, so he's going backwards from that and using real life moon phases to figure out, well, where should it have been in The Hobbit, perhaps? And
Yeah.
he came up with the Durin's Day of Shire November 8th in his calculation. But you know, if the dwarves did consider that the autumn equinox is the middle of autumn and the winter solstice is the middle of winter, then they probably would consider the beginning of winter to be right in the middle of the Shire month of November.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as and that sounds reasonable to me. You know, other cultures do it differently. When I was reading, for my lunar read-along blog post, and I was reading very carefully the Lord of the Rings and how the seasons were represented in there, it seemed kind of implied to me that maybe the hobbits probably viewed like December 1st in their calendar to be the beginning of winter.
Okay.
And Andreas Moen, or sorry if I said that wrong, Codex Regius, aka, in his, I think he believes that the dwarves might have saw the beginning of winter as being the beginning of November in the Shire.
Okay.
Because especially when he worked out with real moon phases, starting with the crescent moon of Mid-Year's Day, and he ended up with a Durin's Day of Shire October 22nd. Mm-hmm. And logically speaking, when you say the last week of autumn, October 22nd is also the last week in the month of October of the Shire calendar. So he seems to think that maybe the beginning of winter for them would be the beginning of November. I don't know. I'm kind of leaning towards other people like Douglas Harder that say that the middle of winter would be right between the equinox and the solstice, which is the middle of Shire, the month of November in Shire. Which, if you want to equate that with the modern date, that's right around in our calendar, right around November 6th or November 7th, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, like, if I'm trying to figure out when's Durin's Day, I would look for, and another thing about Durin's Day too is, like, from Thorin's statement, people might assume that the New Year of the dwarves has to do with like the astronomical new moon. Maybe not. But the thing is about an astronomical new moon, it's really physically impossible to see a new moon with your naked eye. It's way too close to the sun. Even after the sun sets. And I even made a blog post about this in my lunar read-along blog, where Shire-Reckoning.com even goes into this, where Sam sees a thin crescent of a new moon on February 22nd. Okay. But it really should have been quite impossible, because when you look at when you know that Tolkien used the real life moon phases of 1940 and 1941, and you line that up with the moon phases in the story, it turns out that the date of February 22nd, Third Age, 3019, that would have been the day of the new moon. So it really should have been like physically, realistically possible for Sam to see. Yeah. And I've even found an astronomy picture of the day animated GIF where they show like a thin crescent of a new moon, like maybe less than 24 hours old, like right on the horizon, right after the sunset. But the only way they spotted it was like with telescope. It's probably not possible to see with your own eyes. But that's why people like Codex Regius and Aaron Chong, they say, okay, Durin's Day, it's not to do with the new moon. It's gonna have to be a few days after the new moon when you can actually see the moon. Because in the story, Bilbo sees the moon with the sun in the sky even before the sun sets. So it seems to be that's also part of Durin's Day, is being able to see the sun and the moon in the sky together before the sun sets. And that's, in my personal experience, that's usually, well, Andreas Moon says it's maybe 2 to 3 days after a new moon.
Sure.
Yeah. And he was doing these blog posts in 2017 because it turned out that the new moon of 2017 was, I think, October 19th or 20th, really close to what he was using for his ephemeris for the story. And yeah, I couldn't see I went out myself to try to spot the crescent moon while the sun was still up. 2 days after the new moon on October 21st, I couldn't see it. Okay. But the next day I went out on October 22nd, and it took me a little while. It's really hard to spot a thin crescent in that blue sky, but I found it. Yeah, and I was pretty happy. Yeah. So in my personal experience, it takes probably 3 days after a new moon to be able to spot it. In Dr. Larson's paper, Deconstructing Durin's Day, she quotes other people who have done research on this, and they say something about I believe they think that there needs to be a 35-degree separation between the sun and the moon in order for you to see it. Yeah, to see the crescent moon. Yeah, and then what I learned from Alex Munoz of Your Smile is they've done some calculations, and they go by illumination apparently, and they say it needs to be like 10% illuminated to spot it, and so there's all these like different ways to do it, and
to do that.
Yeah, but I'm relying on the research of others when it comes to Durin Day myself. But yeah, I believe 2 at best, but most likely 3 days after a new moon, and before November 6th or 7th is nice. What I personally would consider to be the moon of Durin's Day.
Yeah, it all depends on latitude and the different locations, right? Of the observer.
Too. Yeah, there's all this astronomical phenomenon that I'm not an expert in that can also affect like whether or not you can see them. I mean, from what I understand, like the Islamic calendar relies on them being able to spot the crescent moon for certain events and holidays and such. And I think there's still research going on to try and figure out when it's possible to see a crescent moon. It's not an easy thing from my understanding.
Probably Sam was able to see the new moon because he was wearing the ring and he had these enhanced abilities.
Oh, maybe. Although on February 22nd, they were still floating down the Anduin. They were still. He didn't had the ring yet. Yeah, but he did. I did notice that Tolkien said he saw the crescent moon reflecting in a lake. So who knows? Maybe it was a magic lake. It could have been a magic lake like Mirror, where Durin and Mirror. Maybe this lake you could see the new moon for some reason. Yes, who knows, right?
Galadriel influence or something. Yeah,
maybe right.
So Paul, there are other websites. You're mentioning other websites or other sources, other people that are talking about these different projects that connect literature, philology, programming. Do you notice any maybe role that technology has now in the Tolkien studies and probably the humanities? Any specific importance that this conjunction may have?
Wow, I mean, yeah. So the conjunction of technology and the humanities. I mean, that sounds like that could seriously be like a graduate level research topic right there. And I wouldn't put myself to be an expert in that in the least. But what I can speak on is my personal experience in what I have found. The technology now, technology is a great tool. And in my case of the Shire-Reckoning project, it was just a tool to visualize what Tolkien was getting across and what he was saying in Appendix D. And but then you have all these other great tools too. Sticking with Tolkien, you have Eldamo, where you can just look up these like Sindarin and Quenya words if you want to know how to translate something, from English back and forth. Or you have online communities like Reddit, where you can ask a Sindarin expert a translation question, and technology like that is just right at your fingers. And I was actually. I watched your interview with William Fliss, and the digitizing of the Tolkien's manuscripts. Yes. I mean, that's great because you can preserve the original manuscript, but still allow researchers access to the information on them, and they can still see with their own eyes the original information without compromising the physical manuscripts.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, Tolkien Gateway again, like what a great resource. It's, you know, being able to compile all this information in a way that's easy to look up and easy to go through, but still reference back to the original books, and you can still go back to the original sources if you want. Yeah, I mean, I think these are all just, there's just so many great technology resources out there now for researchers and people studying Tolkien. But, you know, I'm sure there's you know, even like if I wanted to do like translate things into other real life languages, like Japanese, for example, there's great online tools for that as well. Yeah.
There's this project that is called Digital Tolkien Project, which is like this scholarly attempt to maybe like to combine or to have this corpus of linguistical and digital resources. Do you happen to know about this project? Have you interacted with it?
I haven't really had the occasion to interact with it myself. I mean, when I have heard about it, and when I first heard about it, I did try it out, and it's pretty amazing how you could just like search for any word or phrase in Tolkien's writing and get all the references, and you can go look it up yourself. That seems fantastic to me. But yeah, I'm not too familiar with it. And last I heard, I did hear that the Tolkien Gateway is gonna try and start using the citation references, the way Digital Tolkien Project cites things. They're gonna try and do the same thing with their citations, which is kind of neat. That just seems like it's an interesting way to do it, because you know different people have different versions of the books, and sometimes they'll have different page numbers. So I think that's a pretty good idea. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with it, but it just seems like a really interesting project to me.
Great. And the citations, you know, the organizing citations in the same way, it's going to develop this whole maybe more production of academic products and academic research, and it will be easier to correlate maybe. Do you maybe did you ever consult with this other developer? His name is Brandon Rhodes. He also developed a Tolkien calendar, and it's also available at this website that you mentioned, the Shire-Reckoning.com. Did you ever get the chance to maybe talk to him or maybe compare findings or maybe have collaboration with him?
No, I haven't contacted him or collaborated with him at all. Like I mentioned before, like his website was a huge influence on me in starting my project. And even to this day, when you look at the Shire calendar on my project in the year view, and when you view the whole entire year, it looks basically the same layout as his website. And of course, you know, I follow his advice and keeping Mid-Year's Day in line with the modern summer solstice. So yeah, it's been a huge influence on me, especially in the early days. And then even when I went to do my my lunar read-along project, and I did my blog post with that, I relied on the notations, the annotations of the Lord of the Rings Reader's Companion for that, because they had moon phases and dates. Like that's just an amazing thing. I would really appreciate the annotations of The Hobbit, and I just knew that getting the annotations from the Reader's Companion, same thing, well worthwhile. If anyone out there has read The Lord of the Rings and you want to read it again, I would recommend that Lord of the Rings Reader's Companion by Hammond and Skull. So much great information in there in background. But that was a huge help in me in doing the lunar read-along project and getting the lunar phases aligned with the Shire calendar dates. And of course, my own project, the interactive calendar, helped me with that as well. You know, and that's what I hope for my project, is it'll help anybody who wants to use it as a tool for something like that. Hopefully it helps them out. But anyway, yeah, so I did go back, and I was familiar with like his timeline and his lunar phases he describes in The Lord of the Rings. I mean, what's really impressive about his site is that he went through all that calculation analysis before he even knew from the history of Middle Earth that Tolkien used real-world moon phases of 1940 and 1941, and he guessed it. He guessed that it was a possibility, and it turns out he guessed correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really impressive. And I did, when I was doing my my lunar read-along blog posts, and making notes and publishing stuff, I would go back and reference his site just to see if there was something I was missing or not. But no, I've used it quite a lot, but I've never been personally in touch with him before.
Okay. Have you also interacted with maybe maps, interactive maps, textual corpora, anything like from, you mentioned several websites, but anything additional?
Sure. Yeah. I mentioned Encyclopedia of Arda. I used a bit in the early days, but now mainly I use Tolkien Gateway. I mentioned that. I use that all the time. And in fact, when I don't want to add a bunch of detail to my project, I'll put a link to Tolkien Gateway, because that's what it's there for, and that's what online web pages are for, right?
Yeah.
Put a link. But there are other websites. Like the interactive maps on the LOTR project that I thought was really fascinating. That was a great resource.
Okay.
Then there's communities, online communities like Reddit. I posted on the Tolkien fans subreddit.
Okay.
And especially when I was in the early days, trying to get ideas and see if I got something right or wrong, I try and post there. Or in the Sindarin subreddit, I got a lot of help for trying to, because unfortunately Tolkien, he doesn't give you the Sindarin names for some of the translations, just the Quenya and the English. And but I was able to get help with getting the Sindarin translation for some of those month names in the Númenor calendar. And then let's see, what other online sites? Yeah, there's the LTR project, there's Tolkien Gateway, there's Reddit, Eldamo I mentioned, for getting translations.
Because even Tolkien's Gateway is great. It's a great site for art, and there are many different links to different artistic development, which is also really interesting. Fan fiction that evolves from that. So I think it's a great source, that the one that you mentioned. I've noticed Reddit. It's an interesting place to maybe feel that you're part of a conversation. You see, like this debate that you might have with other creators. In your case, have you ever received a feedback from maybe members from the Tolkien community or general audience that interact with your project, and have you received comments about that?
A little bit, sure. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I've gotten some good comments, from Reddit, from the Tolkien fans Reddit, and a couple of personal messages of appreciation of my project, and a little bit on Facebook when I was doing my lunar read along project. My blog posts, I would post also to the Tolkien Society Facebook group, and every so often I would get some encouraging, some compliments on there, which is great. And of course, Alex Munoz, he reached out through my GitHub project, which is another good way to reach out. And another person also reached out through the project, opening an issue. Yeah, so I've gotten some good feedback every so often. I've gotten some good criticisms too, to tell you the truth. Some I don't agree with, but but still, it's good to get help me refine my ideas, because if I wasn't engaged with the community at all, I might have just dropped the project a long time ago. It might have just stayed the Wide Day project and just the basic, here's today's date, here's the calendar, and that's that. And I might not have gone as far as making a simulation and stuff, but once I started getting into doing the simulations, and actually doing the simulations, I felt like helped me get some insights into what Tolkien was saying. And every so often I thought like, well, is he implying something here? Maybe, maybe not. And I would go to the community and ask about that. And I would get, you know, maybe some criticism on that, like, well, you can't really jump to that conclusion based on that. And I think that's great, because it's helped me refine my project and not like do too much speculation. If I do speculation, I'm trying to admit it so people know. You know, I've heard online, especially in, you know, Reddit and Tolkien Society communities, that like someone like David Day, encyclopedias, he'll give you a lot of great information about what Tolkien wrote in his encyclopedias, but sometimes, you know, he'll just give you his own ideas, but it's not always clear which is which. And if you're not a Tolkien expert, maybe you might just be taking something he made up as face value, as something that came from Tolkien, when it actually didn't. So I'm trying to be very careful in my project to say, you know, this is what Tolkien said, and this is what I got from Tolkien's writings, but this is what my speculation, and this is what I think could have happened, or this is what I had to make up in order to make these simulations work. And yeah, sometimes like the community feedback and criticisms has actually helped with that. And in fact, like I did this whole essay on the King's Reckoning deficit, is what Tolkien calls it. And it has to do with the leap day rules once again, and how, you know, the leap day rules is trying to keep the calendar in sync with the seasons, but it's not perfect. And when it falls out of sync, you know, if it falls behind, I think is what Tolkien calls the deficit. In our calendar, it's the opposite. We have a little bit of a surplus. It falls the other way in the seasons. But yeah, you know, I didn't need to like understand that what Tolkien was talking about with that to do my simulations. So I kind of ignored it until Codex Regius and Andreas Moon, he thought he had an insight into the Tolkien's deficit calculations. And he thought like, well, actually, he came up with an idea that, you know, maybe there was like these extra steward's reckoning rules that would make these deficit calculations work out. And he made a blog post about what he thought like were these extra rules that maybe Tolkien just didn't put in Appendix D or something like that. And, you know, I was kind of skeptical of that. And, you know, I was like asking questions about it or whatever. I was like, oh, it seems too complicated to me. He's like, no, it's not drastic at all, is what he said. I thought it was something drastic because I was doing my simulations and trying to get like all the leap days and holidays right. It seemed to me like an extra holiday or an extra leap day, that's like something of significance that would have shown up in Tolkien's writings. And so I used my project to do the calculations myself, and that's when I became convinced that actually, no, I think Tolkien, like, he spelled it out as far as the Númenor and Gondor calendars are concerned. He spelled it all out. It's all there, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, it's the back and forth like that like has like really pushed my project further and further. And you know, I ended up writing an essay that I published in Beyond Bree about that.
Great. Do you have any other plans, maybe to expand that project or these other writings that you could also explore to other Middle Earth calendars? Maybe something that was not described by Tolkien, but the way that you're mentioning, you can maybe come to agreements and make correlations that could probably work. Do you have any other special projects close?
No, not at this time. Like, once again, like my project was really focused on Appendix D, and as far as I can tell, I think I've taken that as far as I can take it. I think I've explored as much as I can explore in that. I mean, there are like, you know, sources outside that, you know, like I mentioned, the Holiday of Gates of Summer and the Silmarillion, and of course in the history of Middle Earth, it was really interesting. I checked that out of the library to see if I could learn more about Appendix D. I think it was the volume The Peoples of Middle Earth, where the history of the appendices are detailed. And there's a really interesting early draft of the new Reckoning calendar, and it's laid out in a nice table and how it aligns with the Shire Reckoning calendar, and it's quite different than where the calendars ended up in Appendix D. But I can almost see the beginnings of that's really similar to the calendar of Gondor, but there's also a little bit of Rivendell Reckoning in there. Real interesting, but I don't think I think I'm just keeping the calendars of Appendix D as the focus of my Shire Reckoning project. And as far as I can tell, like my last update to it was being able to allow you to choose to look at the dates, whether it's a date before sunrise, during the daytime, and after sunset. And this is because, our modern calendar, and it's really heavily implied that the Shire calendar, the dates go from midnight to midnight. Everybody should be familiar with that, right? But the Rivendell Reckoning is different. They do their dates from sunset to sunset. Yeah. So like, right now, if, say today is, the 51st of, what do you call it? Yavier. I hope I pronounced that right. The 51st day of autumn in the Rivendell Reckoning. Yeah, it would be the 51st until the sun went down. And then it would be the next day, then it would be the 52nd day. And then in Númenor, it's different. They go from sunrise to sunrise. And it's even kind of like makes an appearance in the story when Pippin is in Minas Tirith and he wakes up the next day and he hears the 3 chimes of the bell. And he says, that's the 3rd hour. And that's because they recognize that that's the 3rd hour from sunrise. And he says, we would call that 9 o'clock in the shower, in the Shire. So yeah, so that shows you that the Shire is going, their days change from midnight to midnight, but not in Gondor. They go from sunrise to sunrise. And so that was one of the last things I put in my calendar, was letting you choose whether it's, it's the Shire day, it's a modern Gregorian day, but is it before sunrise or after sunset or during the daytime? And the calendars will adjust themselves based on that. And that's as far as I think I could take it, probably.
Excellent. For some people, the best way to start their days will be at sunset, and they have this night of production. So.
Oh, right. Yeah. I'm a bit of a night owl myself.
Yeah. So, Paul, finally, do you think that you, as an academic and as a Tolkienist, would you think that the lasting legacy of the Shire Reckoning project could become like this international, or could be part of this international Tolkien studies to be included as such?
I mean, that would be like, I'd be flattered and honored if that were the case, of course. Yeah, I mean, the Shire Reckoning project was first and foremost, a project for me. Like I said, it started off as just a fun project I was having fun with, and I continue on with it because it's been fun for me. And the more I did it, the more I thought, well, I can use this as a tool to, perhaps understand when people are making comparisons of Shire and Rivendell calendars. For example, Andreas Muin did that. He goes into some details about Appendix D and comparing Rivendell Reckoning and Shire Reckoning. And I don't always agree with all of his ideas on Appendix D, but there's still pretty interesting ideas. I kind of made this Shire Reckoning project as a tool for myself to see if it's simulated accurately, does that argument hold true? Or what can you learn about, this, more about the Tolkien's writings or the holidays and how they relate to each other, that was mostly for myself. So if anybody else finds my project useful and they can use my calendars as a tool, if someone else is interested in saying we got all the Shire dates in Appendix B, but what was the date like for that in Gondor at the time, and maybe what was the date in Rivendell at that time? I hope they find my project useful for that. So yeah, that's my main hope, is that it's at least a useful tool for anyone who wants to learn more from Tolkien's writings, or maybe just wants to learn more about how it relates to even like real world calendars and stuff, you know, to our modern day calendar. Yeah.
In our case, this is, you know, first-hand information, because our president Alejandro and this other partner that we have, they both follow your indications, and they were able to identify Durin's Day for our latitude in Chihuahua, which is like the interesting development in our SMIAL and the way that we observe the dates and the traditions, and the way that we try to adapt these fictional events into our contemporary lives. And so we're very grateful for your project. We're very happy that you're developing these, not only as a side project because you have your job and your occupations and your concerns, but you have so much passion for this other project, and it's been extremely useful and effective for us. So we really appreciate your work, and we encourage you to continue and to, you know, think about other additions that you can make, because it's great. So.
Oh, great. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. And yeah, I hope I can still continue making improvements to it. I know that, you know, it can definitely use some improvements when you're viewing it on a mobile device. It's not so great on that, but who knows? Maybe one of these days I might be inspired to do something additional to it, or add something else I didn't think of before, or if I've come across you know, something other. I'm always learning something new. Even recently, I saw a talk about Tolkien and the Anglo-Saxon. You know, what is her name? Oh shoot, I can't think of it. Dr. Eleanor Parker. Yeah, sorry, I had to check my notes. Yeah, Dr. Eleanor Parker gave a great talk, and she even like came up with a great translation of what the month of March in the Gondor calendar would be, or is it no, the month of March in the Shire calendar, which is called Retha, and you know, it's other people have speculated in English that could mean, you know, something like a windy month, or is it? Oh, I forget which one. It might be the month before that, February. But anyway, she came up with a great translation that it could mean a stormy month.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so I included that in my project. So, you know, there's always like Tolkien research going on, and I'm trying to keep up with it. And so every so often I'll learn something new and I get to include it in my project.
Great. So maybe people that are watching this interview could also check your website, and we have a lot of, you know, these correlations with different dates, and there are different memes that sometimes they come out with these associations and say today is the day that Boromir died, or, you know, this type of events. But hopefully they will also interact with your website and also enjoy it in the same way that we have enjoyed it.
Great. Yeah, that's what I hope too. I hope people find it useful and enjoyable. Yeah, that's what I hope. Thank you.
No, thank you, Paul. It's been a pleasure to talk to you during this maybe a couple of hours now, but we really appreciate your work, and we really appreciate your willingness to be here with us. So thank you again, and well, we wish you the best for your project as well.
Of course. Yeah. And I appreciate you inviting me, and it's been an enjoyable talk for me too. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Great.
Yeah. So I would just thank you once again for having me on your interview, and I'm honored again. And I just want to say to everyone in the Tolkien Society of Mexico, I want to wish everyone a happy Durin's Day. You know, whether you're observing on October 25th, 2025 this year, like you for the Tolkien Society of Mexico is, or if you're in a different part of the world and you happen to see a thin crescent moon out during the day or just before sunset on the 24th, happy Durin's Day either way. And I'd like to, and I'll be toasting with my Green Dragon Inn stein full of pumpkin beer, and wishing everyone happy Durin's Day. Salud.
Happy Durin's Day, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you.